I am Uhtred, son of Uhtred, Uhtred Ragnarsson, the rightful heir of Bebbanburg. Destiny is all. Season 5 of The Lost Kingdom is just about here, and in preparation, I have been binging the first 4 seasons. Now, I've already reviewed the first season, but now I want to share my thoughts on seasons 2, 3, and 4. Now, I'm going to stay away from big spoilers just in case you haven't seen the show. And there may be some minor spoilers as they relate to plot points, but I'm going to keep them as minor as I can. So when Season 2 picks up, there's been a small time jump from Season 1. Probably the most noticeable attribute of the time passing is Ethelfled, Alfred and Ealhswith's daughter, who went from being just this really little girl to now a young woman. So Uhtred helped Alfred defeat the Danes at Ethandun, and now he's going to try and reclaim Bebbanburg with the help of that awesome warrior nun Hild. Like all seasons, there is massive conflict brewing, and part of this comes this season from Dane brothers Eric and Sigifrid. Now, they are brutal and they wreak all kinds of havoc, but they're also very charismatic. Now, decisions are made as the season progresses that really endeared a certain character to me. There was growth from them that then led to something that I was totally rooting for. We also meet the simple King Uhtred and his sister Gisela, plus we're introduced to some other new characters like Finan and Ethelred. And of course, trechery abounds through this season. Uhtred constantly finds himself in the middle of all sorts of conflicts, making him choose alliances that continue to keep him from pursuing his birthright at Bebbanburg. The political schemings are always fascinating to me, but they're also incredibly engaging. I shake my head at how Uhtred's honor prevents him from pursuing his own goals. But this is what makes his character so dynamic and watchable. He can't help but get involved when others need him. And the story crafts his interactions in such a way to be terribly aggravating, but noble at the same time. And oh my goodness, there are some characters that gain some prominence in this season, and they are the ones that we just love to hate. And I constantly was wishing for bad things to happen to them. And I love how this invested me even further into the show, because some of the villains aren't big and dangerous with a sword. Their tongues are their weapons, and they're just as deadly. Now, there's some epic battles in this where the fighting is absolutely brutal and bloody. This is partly why I watch the show. I want crazy, huge, hand-to-hand combat fights where people are getting slashed and smashed. And this show delivers. But with that, it doesn't mean that characters don't always come out unharmed. Just like when Leofric died in Season 1, there are times in this that made me gasp and then yell at the TV, which then also let me know that I should be wary of who I get attached to. Seriously, some of these characters are so charismatic and awesome that I can't help but love them. Season 2 ends with something spectacular and powerful, setting a massive trajectory for a key player for the next couple of seasons. And I love how heroes are established in this. Most of the time, it's earned through battle, but it's typically the ones that I wasn't necessarily expecting to rise up to the level that they do. In Season 1, we watched King Alfred have health issues, and we'll watch his health deteriorate as the show progresses, which causes all kinds of chess moves around him and behind him. And all through this, the stubbornness of a king and the pig-headedness of a warrior, they clash despite being so good together. I love the ups and downs that we watch between Uhtred and Alfred. Their complex relationship is captivating, but then it's also maddening. Now, when Season 3 arrives, we are introduced to a brutal warrior named Bloodhair. Just listen to his name. And he has a witch named Skade, and the opening sequence with her, it's really insane. She is just as deadly as him, and neither of them should be crossed. So, of course, at some point, Uhtred is gonna get in their way. Now, Season 3 might be the darkest of all of the seasons so far, which is saying something because death and deceit have been present in all of them. This season, though, gives some really big gut punches over the course of the 10 episodes, and I think it was really heartbreaking. We're also watching Alfred's health fail even more, which then allows the story to shine more focus on his children, Ethelfled and Edward. Now, Ethelfled got a lot of story time in Season 2, and she continues to have it in this season, but we're also watching the grooming of the boy who will be king. The scheming's come to a massive head this season, which causes so much drama for the story. And not all of it takes place within the court. There are wheelings and dealings that some slimy characters carry out through different groups of Danes and Saxons, which then creates unrest and turmoil in just about every situation. Now, this caused so much aggravation for me, which is again very engaging, but I couldn't wait for very bad things to happen to a couple of key players. This season also helps to solidify the outstanding band of warriors that fight with Uhtred. Now, I love Hild, but she's hung up her axe and sword, but there's still Sihtric, Osferth, and Finan, plus the loyal Father Beocca, and even the warrior priest Pyrling. We also get to see more of Ragnar and Brida, which is great, despite the conflicts that typically surround them all. Now, I think outside of Uhtred and Beocca, my favorite character of the show is Finan. He is an Irishman who Uhtred met when he went on an unexpected journey in Season 2. Now, Finnan is so funny, and there are so many times throughout the series that I was chuckling out loud from things that he would say or looks that he'd do. But what would make them especially funny was to watch the reactions from Father Bayoka. Now, it's kind of like watching a dad try not to laugh when his son tells an inappropriate joke, knowing that he shouldn't be laughing, but also wanting to laugh because the joke was so clever. As the season goes on, there is this crazy tension that builds because of what's happening with some of our characters. And we can feel the pressure from people's thirst for power. And there is this nail-biting climax that while I was pretty sure I knew how it was going to turn out, I couldn't be 100% certain because other outcomes were still options. And I don't think that the show is afraid to go certain directions simply based on what else has been done to other characters. This season also allows for some other characters to gain more prominence in the story. Now, sure, Uhtred is still the central focus, but while the first two seasons have focused heavily on Wessex, the kingdom of Mercia now becomes more central to the story. And just because we focus on a different kingdom, the backstabbing and cunning deceit still play heavily in the narrative. But I love how this allows for new heroes and new villains to take the focus. We have characters like Ethelred, Ethelhelm, Aldhelm, and Ethelfleth. And Jesus, there are a lot of names with this A, right? Now, these all rise to various levels of prominence in the story, and some may make you actually want to throw something at them through the TV. Now, I mentioned how this might be the darkest season of the first four, and that's because we have a lot of shifts in power and the consequences that those bring. And just like in the first two seasons, some of our characters don't continue on in the story. Some of them I cheered for their death, and others just made me mad because I liked them so much. But then the emotion that follows is also just as powerful. And I love how the story uses this to continuously shape the characters, hardening some and then defeating others. As each episode progresses, we see more fracturing of the powers. Now, I couldn't binge fast enough. I was sucked in so much to everything that was going on. And even if I hated a character, the acting is so stellar that I had visceral reactions to them. Now, I haven't mentioned it so far, but the costume and set designs are also so well done. Now, I don't know how historically accurate the costumes actually are, but they match exactly the mental picture that I imagine people of that time wearing. Plus, the mud and the muck that is almost ever present are captured really well. I love that the characters are filthy, that they have dirty fingernails and then dirt in the creases of their necks. Sure, their teeth are typically much whiter than I'm sure people of the time were experiencing, but who cares? They look and the feel of everything else just feels right. The buildings, huts, palaces, and camps give off a sense of realism, and then coldness. The constant mud in the towns just looks to be miserable and freezing. The settings, especially for the buildings, allow for a lot of shadows, which then in turn allow for all of the villains to lurk and scheme in those shadows. And I like how the production keeps the ambience dark at times. They choose not to overlight a scene in order to create this coldness and intrigue. I also love the score of this show. From some of the driving rock guitars and drums to the vocalization of the chorus of the show's theme. It plays so many times throughout the show, creating these rising swells of emotion as the scenes build. The scenery is amazing to look at, and I love how the show shows us the original name of a location and then has the on-screen title morph into what the name is today. Now, while a lot of them are repetitive, when the new one comes on, it's always fun for me to try and guess what the present-day name is before it morphs. Now, one thing I absolutely cannot stand in this show, and thankfully I can skip whenever it comes on, it's Uhtred's voiceover that's a recap of what's happened in either the episode or the season before. While I love the character of Uhtred, listening to that voiceover is painful. His accent and speaking cadence just come across so grating. It's almost like he's speaking and then struggling to maintain the accent of the character. So I just press the skip recap button and poof, I'm happy and I'm into the show. Now, this doesn't affect my enjoyment of the series because when I'm watching Uhtred, his accent sounds good and it doesn't bother me. It's just in those recaps of the introduction that go wonky. Now, Season 4 continues the trend of tense wheelings and dealings. We finally get to see Uhtred progress towards his goal of reclaiming Bebbanburg. There's a scene in the first couple of episodes that made me gasp, and then what follows is just unbridled rage. Now, that's from a character, not unbridled rage for me. The scene is so powerful, and it sends a character on a path that feels lost. Now, while I hated the scene, I loved what this means for the story and the character. It's not something that we've really seen before from them, which makes the brand new trajectory way more exciting because it's unknown. This show continues to amaze me with the brutality that it shows. I know there were violent times, but it certainly makes me thankful that I live now rather than then. And through most of the show, I have loved the camera work and the cinematography. We are placed right in the middle of the fray, and it's exciting the way that all of the action is captured. I also like that even though the battles are frenetic, the camera work itself allows us to see the action taking place and then appreciate the crazy choreography that is created to make all of these battles look so realistic. But with that being said, there are some times in this fourth season where the camera angles and even the quality felt different, but not really in a good way. I mean, sometimes it felt like a GoPro or something like that was used to film small parts, and those just don't look cinematic in any way. Now, luckily, these aren't used extensively through the season, so while they were mildly distracting when they were going on, they didn't overtake the look and the feel of the show that's been established through this point. More and more treachery continues in the season, but thankfully, in some situations, wisdom is gained and some of the villains are thwarted. But also, a vow is made by one of the characters that is sure to lead to a terrible climax. Now, the pace of the show is tense and driving. There are moments where the story breathes and it does slow down a bit, but it never relents in the urgency and pressure. There's a constant momentum that's innate in the story, and the narrative effectively switches scenes to keep the interest high and also keep us invested in each of the storylines. So I binged this show in order to be caught up for the fifth and final season. But honestly, I was genuinely invested in the show. I had to keep binging because the characters, the drama, the scheming, even the action, it all continued to hook me episode after episode. I found myself skipping sleep just to eke out one more episode, and I really hope that this fifth season is gonna be epic. Now, Uhtred has some realizations that help to determine his next paths, and because of how the kingdoms are shaping up, there are sure to be incredible clashes and more backstabbing, both literally and figuratively. I'm excited to now see where this next season is going to take us, but I'm also just a bit sad that it's going to be coming to an end. But we also then have a movie that the showrunners have said will be more of a standalone story. Throughout all of the seasons, there is sex, nudity, a lot of profanity, and almost never-ending brutal and bloody violence. I give season 2 4 out of 5 couches, season 3 4.5 out of 5 couches, and season 4 4 out of 5 couches. So what are you looking forward to in season 5? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me. Destiny is all.